I work in a building that most people consider ordinary, a glass and steel tower rising over the downtown streets of the city. Nothing remarkable about it, at least not at first glance. I've been taking the elevator to my office on the 12th floor for months. Without incident, the buttons gleam under fluorescent light. The digital floor indicator ticks evenly, and the cables hum a constant low vibration beneath my feet, a normal routine. And yet the first time I encountered floor -1, it felt like a mistake. It was late one evening. I was leaving the office long after the cleaning crew had gone. The hallways were empty and silent, the fluorescent lights buzzing faintly above me. I stepped into the elevator, pressed the button for the ground floor, and the doors slid shut with their familiar metallic sound. The elevator hummed and shook slightly as it began its descent, but then the indicator did something unusual. It flashed -1 once in, bright red, before returning to 1. I frowned, assuming it was a glitch. I pressed the ground floor button again. Nothing changed. The doors slid open, and instead of the lobby, I was looking into a dark, narrow corridor. The air smelled stale and metallic, and the fluorescent lights from the elevator did not extend far enough to reveal the end of the hallway. The walls were painted gray, but the paint peeled in places and black streaks ran down the surface like soot. I stepped out cautiously, my hand brushing the wall. As if to steady myself, the doors slid closed behind me, and the elevator hummed quietly, as though idling, waiting for me to return. I called out, but no answer came. Only my voice echoed back at me, bouncing off the wall, stretching and twisting unnaturally down the corridor. I noticed then that the floor was not tile like the rest of the building, but cold concrete, and uneven in places. I tried to return to the elevator, but when I turned, the doors were gone, as though they had never existed. The wall was solid gray, no seam, no metal to indicate an entrance. I took a step back, and the air shifted. The temperature dropped sharply, my breath fogging in front of my face. The lights flickered, and for a moment I thought I saw something moving at the far end of the corridor, just beyond the reach of the dim glow. I told myself it was a trick, my eyes adjusting to the darkness. But then I heard a soft metallic clink, like a button being pressed, a floor indicator flickering somewhere far away. It was impossible, but it made the hairs on my neck rise. I moved cautiously toward the sound, each step echoing unnaturally in the corridor, and every time I looked over my shoulder, I thought I glimpsed the doors of the elevator shimmering just out of reach. The corridor stretched longer than it should have, my sense of distance warping. I took what felt like 30 steps, and still the end was nowhere in sight. The air was thicker now, oppressive, like it weighed down on my chest, and every time I inhaled, it tasted faintly of rust and dust. My foot caught on a raised seam in the concrete, and I stumbled forward onto my hands, a shadow stretching over me, as if to consume me. And then I heard the laugh, not loud, not human, but dry, metallic, and distant, like it had come from the elevator itself. It reverberated through the corridor and stopped me cold. My mind reeled, trying to rationalize it. There was no one in this building, no one in this corridor, and yet the sound of someone or something moving buttons somewhere underground had reached me through the thick, stale air. I forced myself to stand and continued walking toward the sound. The clinking came again. The faint glow of a red light appeared far ahead. I reached it and saw a panel embedded in the wall, flickering weakly with a single illuminated button labeled -1. The metal was cold under my fingers, and I pressed it instinctively. The corridor trembled, the lights flickered violently, and a low vibration ran through the floor. It felt as though the building itself was alive and aware of my presence. The air shifted again, and when the lights steadied, I realized I was no longer in the corridor, but back inside the elevator doors. Closed calmly in front of me, the floor indicator steady at -1. I had no recollection of the ride. I pressed every other floor button, none responded. The elevator hummed steadily, and the red -1 glowed softly, as if inviting me to see what was below. I wanted to leave, I wanted to escape, but a part of me could not resist the pull, the curiosity, the compulsion to press the button and see what the floor held. And then the doors opened, the smell hit me first, damp mold and rust, and something metallic that made my stomach turn. The floor was darker than the corridor, a thick gray concrete that seemed to absorb light and sound. The walls were narrow and too close, and the air was impossibly still, as if even the tiniest movement would echo endlessly across the floor. I stepped out cautiously, my boots echoing faintly, and then I saw the first marks on the walls, long claw-like scratches, as though something had tried to get out. Something had been here before me, and I was not alone. I could not move at first, standing there in the dim glow of the elevator panel. I stared down the narrow hallway of floor -1. The scratches on the wall stretched farther than I could see, deep gouges pressed into the concrete and metal, like something had been climbing, desperately trying to escape or reach me. The smell of rust and damp grew heavier with each breath I took, and the air felt thick in my lungs, as though it resisted my movement. I forced myself to take a step forward, and the concrete floor beneath my boots creaked faintly, but unevenly, not tile, not normal concrete, but something warped and brittle, as though the building had aged decades in a single night. The corridor twisted in impossible ways, long stretches that seemed to go on forever, and sudden turns that should have looped me back, yet always opened into more darkness. I tried calling out, hoping someone would answer, hoping it was a maintenance floor or a janitor trapped somewhere, but my voice seemed to vanish before it traveled. The elevator door closed silently behind me, as though it had never been there. I spun back toward the metal surface that had been so familiar just moments ago, and it shimmered faintly before vanishing in a gray wall. Nothing remained of the panel, nothing of the buttons I had pressed, nothing to indicate an escape route. I was trapped then. I heard the soft mechanical hum of the elevator moving. I could feel the vibrations beneath the concrete, faint but steady, and then the sound of metal striking metal, faint clinking, like a button being pressed over and over, and behind it that laugh again, low, dry, and echoing metallic, somehow not fully human. The sound traveled down the corridor, yet seemed to come from all directions at once. My skin crawled, and I stumbled backward, my shoulders scraping against the wall. I turned a corner, and the hallway seemed to stretch into infinity. The lights flickered, dimming in uneven pulses, and shadows coiled in the corners where no light reached. I saw them then faint figures at the far end, tall, thin shapes pressed against the wall. Their movements were minimal, almost imperceptible, but I could feel their attention fixed on me. The air around them shimmered, as though they were not entirely part of the reality of this floor. I tried to run, but my boots slipped on the cold concrete, the corridor bending around me, making every step echo back at impossible intervals. I lost all sense of direction, left and right, up and down, merging into the gray monotony of the floor. The figures seemed to drift closer, though I could see no motion, their presence pressing against my mind with something like intention. At one point, I stumbled onto another panel embedded in the wall, dimly illuminated with a single red button labeled -1. I pressed it on impulse, hoping for some exit, and the hallway convulsed. The walls rippled faintly as if breathing, and I could feel the floor shiver beneath my feet. I could hear the laughter again, louder, closer, echoing from everywhere and nowhere. At once I thought my heart would burst from the strain. A door appeared suddenly at the end of the hallway, a faint glow of light spilling from beneath it. It seemed like salvation, but the air around it was thick and heavy as though. Resisting my approach, I forced myself to take step after step, each more difficult than the last. The closer I got, the heavier the air became, as though the building itself were pressing down to stop me. And then the laughter changed, not playful or mocking now. It was low and guttural, deep vibrations crawling through the concrete into my bones. The walls around me seemed to pulse with it, as though the entire floor was alive, moving and watching and waiting. The door ahead trembled slightly, and the faint glow widened into a sickly yellow light that distorted everything around it. I reached the door and pressed my hand against it. The metal felt cold, impossibly so, like it had absorbed years of decay. The moment I touched it, the floor beneath me groaned, and I saw them again. The figures pressed closer, appearing in corners of my vision, shadows that were not there moments before, stretching impossibly long and tilting their heads as if observing me. I tried to pull away, but the door would not budge. The laughter rose into a crescendo, vibrating in my skull, forcing me to my knees, and I realized that this was not a floor meant for humans, that -1 was something else, a place outside the normal building, a pocket of reality, warped and alive, and I had been pulled. Inside, I pressed my palms against the door frantically, and then the light flared bright, and everything around me shifted. The walls rippled. I felt weightless, and then crushing pressure. All at once the hallway vanished, and I was standing in a dark chamber beneath the building, a room of infinite height, the ceiling lost in shadow, and the floor impossible to see. The figures surrounded me, now closer than ever, pressing against the walls surrounding me, and the laughter was everywhere. I sank to my knees, terrified, frozen by the knowledge that this was no accident. The elevator had brought me here intentionally. The building itself had delivered me to this place, and I was no longer a visitor. I was prey. The chamber stretched endlessly above and below me. I could no longer tell which way was up or down. The concrete beneath my knees had vanished in a darkness, and the ceiling lost itself in a shadow. My heart pounded in my chest, and my breath came shallow and rapid. The air was thick, cold, and metallic, carrying the echo of that same laugh, which now seemed to come from inside my skull as much as from the floor around me. I tried to rise, but the floor felt unstable beneath me, each movement sending a ripple of vibration through my legs. The shadows pressed closer in the corners, impossibly dense. They moved slightly, but not enough for me to perceive exactly how they shifted, with a speed that was not human, yet deliberate, like they were circling me, measuring me, testing my reactions. Then I noticed the walls had changed. I had assumed the chamber was empty, but faint outlines of panels and elevator buttons appeared embedded in the gray concrete. Only this time the labels were wrong. Floors counted downward endlessly: -2, -3, -10, -23, and beyond the numbers glowed faint red like embers, and below them claw marks and scratches spread along the walls as though previous victims had tried to escape or warn me. I pressed a button, randomly one, labeled -3, and the chamber shuddered violently. The air pressed against me, and the shadows stretched higher above me, the laughter now rising in pitch, warping around me in echoes. I realized I could not tell the difference between reality and hallucination. The chamber was alive, and it knew. I was afraid. The light shifted, and suddenly I was standing inside a corridor that twisted and folded upon itself like a Mobius strip. The hallway looped and turned in impossible ways. The walls were lined with more panels, all glowing -1. -2, -4. Endlessly, the temperature dropped sharply, my breath visible in the dim glow, and I could smell metal and decay. Again, the stench of something long dead or kept alive unnaturally in this hidden floor. I heard movement behind me and spun only to see nothing and everything at once. The shadows that had stalked me pressed along the walls closer and then stepped forward faintly into view, long, thin shapes, tilting their heads toward me. Their presence was undeniable. I could feel the pressure against my chest, the weight of them, waiting for me to falter. The laughter cut again, now sharper, faster, echoing off surfaces that should not have existed. I stumbled down the corridor, following a trail of faint scratches in the concrete. They led to a narrow door, partially ajar, and beyond it a dimly lit room filled with more panels and buttons, all glowing red numbers that descended impossibly low. The deepest, -52, -89, -144, and still deeper. My stomach twisted as if the floor itself were turning in on me. Inside the room, I saw remnants of those who had come before, twisted shapes in the wall shadows. Pressed against the concrete that flickered like heat waves, I realized with horror that these were not walls at all, but bodies fused to the floor and ceiling, frozen in positions of terror, their faces blank and stretched into grimaces of laughter that was not theirs. A panel flickered and one of the buttons glowed. Brighter, -1, it pulsed, slowly drawing my gaze. I wanted to turn away, but could not. I felt my hand lift and press it again. Instantly, the chamber collapsed inward around me, the walls folding like paper, the floor twisting beneath me, and the shadows exploded outward, surrounding me, pressing in my mind. I screamed, but the sound never escaped, only the laughter remained. I fell through the shifting corridors and floors for what felt like hours or days or an eternity. The numbers ticked downward endlessly, and with each level the air grew thicker, colder, the metallic stench stronger. I felt myself losing grip on time, on memory, on reality. The figures followed silently, observing, never touching, yet their presence was unbearable, as if the floor itself sought to claim me. Finally, I landed in a vast open space beneath everything. The shadows were gone, but the laughter remained deep and vibrating through the ground. The concrete was slick with moisture, the air still thick and metallic, and before me a single panel glowed, -1 alone, in the center of the vast chamber. The number pulsed like a heartbeat, calling me toward it, and I understood finally this floor had only one purpose: to trap, to feed, and to test the terror of those who pressed the button without knowing what waited. I stepped toward it, my knees weak, my vision blurred, and the shadows reformed behind me, stretching taller, thinner, impossibly fast. They leaned toward me, whispering words I could not understand, yet somehow new meant warning, yet no warning would save me. The laugh rose again, and I pressed the button again because I could not stop myself, and then the floor opened beneath me. I fell into darkness like a stone sinking through water, but colder, heavier, as if the air itself had become solid. My body hit the floor hard, yet it did not hurt. The concrete was soft, almost pulsing beneath me, as if alive. My limbs ached faintly, but my mind screamed louder. The corridors and rooms I had stumbled through were gone, replaced by endless blackness that stretched in every direction. The laughter returned, low at first, almost a whisper, then rising in volume until it filled my ears, vibrating my skull and chest. I could feel it inside my bones, inside my teeth, as though I had become a part of it. I tried to cover my ears, but the sound had no source. It was everywhere and nowhere at once, pressing against me like a living thing. Then the shadows came again, but different now. They moved freely, no. Longer pressed to the walls, they slithered across the floor and coiled in the air, tall, thin shapes, tilting their heads in unison, as if watching my every movement. I could not look away. Their presence commanded my attention, their silence. More terrifying than the laughter itself, the -1 panel hovered in the blackness before me, glowing red, faintly pulsing like a heartbeat. The numbers below it descended endlessly, -2, -3, -10. -23 and beyond. I could feel my own heartbeat synchronized with its pulsing, my body moving toward it despite my will. Each step I took felt heavier, colder, as if the floor sought to hold me in place. Yet I could not stop. I pressed the button again, and the darkness shifted around me. Corridors formed and dissolved in moments, floors stacked impossibly high, and deep shadows pressed closer, moving just at the edge of my vision. I tried to call out to myself, to scream, to stop, but my voice was gone, swallowed by the air vibrating with the laughter. Then the walls themselves moved, tore me not solid, but alive, breathing, pulsing like flesh. My hands brushed against them, and the texture was wrong, cold and wet, yet not liquid, almost sticky, as if the concrete had become something organic. The shadows pressed against these walls, leaning closer, whispering words I could not hear, yet understood as warnings that were meaningless now. I stumbled through one corridor, only to find the walls had changed again, now covered with scratches, claw marks etched deep into the surface, and among them faint outlines of faces, twisted in silent screams. I realized with horror that these were the ones who had come before me, fused into the building itself, trapped like I was. Being trapped, now the -1 panel appeared ahead again, and I felt the compulsion stronger now, a pulling in my chest and my limbs and my mind. I could not resist. I pressed the button again, and this time the air split with a scream, not human, not shadow, not laughter, but raw terror that vibrated through the darkness, shattering everything around me. When I landed this time, the chamber was vast and endless, the floor slick with moisture and unknown substances, the air thick and metallic, and the shadows surrounding me more numerous than ever. Reaching impossibly high, I could not see the ceiling or floor beyond a few steps in front of me. The pulsing red light of the panel floated at the far end, calling me onward, and I knew I could not stop. I could not escape. I moved step by step, drawn forward by the impossible compulsion. The shadows leaned closer, whispering warning threats, laughter urging me to press the button again. My mind splintered. I could not tell if the floor was alive or I had become part of it, if the laughter was outside me or inside me. I could not breathe. I could not think. I could only move. And then the air shifted. I felt weight pressing on me from all directions, my body no longer entirely my own. The laughter rose into a crescendo, all around me vibrating. The floor, walls, ceiling, and shadows alike. I realized with absolute certainty that I had crossed into something that no human was meant to see or touch. Floor -1 had become aware of me, and I had become a part of it, whether I wanted to or not. I pressed a button, once more my hands trembling, and as the red glow pulsed, I felt the darkness fold around me, like paper, the shadows pressing into me like living things, and the laughter splitting into thousands of echoes, vibrating through my skull. The floor itself seemed to breathe, pulling me toward the panel as if to consume me, and then I fell again into a void, colder, heavier, darker than before, and I understood in that instant that there was no way back. The elevator that had once seemed ordinary had been a trap allure, and floor -1 was not a place in the building, but a place outside the building, outside reality, a pocket alive, and hungry. The laughter did not stop, and I knew it never would, and I knew that pressing the button again was the only thing I could do. I no longer knew how long I'd been trapped on floor -1 time, had dissolved into an endless sequence of darkness, corridors folding into themselves, numbers descending endlessly, and laughter vibrating through my bones. The shadows pressed constantly around me, shifting like liquid though solid at the same time, their heads tilted in unison, their presence unbearable, their attention relentless. The -1 panel appeared again, floating in the distance, red, glowing, faintly pulsing with a rhythm that matched my own heartbeat. I tried to resist. I told myself I could turn away, escape, but my legs moved on their own, carrying me closer. Step by step, my hands lifted and pressed the button, and the entire chamber shuddered as if the building itself were alive. My mind reeled, the air thickened, metallic and cold, and the laughter rose louder than ever, echoing through what felt like infinite corridors. Suddenly the shadows surged into motion. They poured from walls and ceiling, from nowhere and everywhere at once, circling me, forming towering shapes that bent impossibly toward the panel. The air was heavy with their pressure, and I felt my chest tighten, as if I were being crushed by the weight of the building itself. The laughter warped, vibrating higher and lower, slicing through my skull and body. I stumbled into a corridor that seemed impossibly long, the numbers on the panels descending endlessly below. -1, -2, -10, -52, -100, and beyond. The scratches on the walls deepened, faces pressed faintly into the concrete, twisted in silent screams, their mouths moving in time with the laughter, as if the floor had devoured them. And now I was next. I pressed the button again, and the corridor dissolved. The floor rippled beneath me, and I fell into a vast chamber, so large I could not see the walls or ceiling. The concrete floor pulsed like a living thing, and the shadows crowded the edges, towering over me, the tallest shapes swaying impossibly there, limbs stretching and bending like they were testing me, weighing me. And then I saw a single figure at the far end of the chamber, tall, thin, and pale gray, its head tilted impossibly wide, its mouth stretched into a grin that was not human, its eyes hollow black voids that seemed to look through me. The laughter surged from it, not sound, but vibration that rattled my skull and bones. I realized with absolute clarity that it was not outside me. It had entered my mind, my body. It was everywhere and nowhere I tried to run. But the floor pulsed with each step, the concrete bending under my weight, and the shadows pressed closer. Their whispers formed words now I could understand, urging commands, warnings, threats, promises. I could not resist. I stumbled toward the panel glowing faintly with a single red -1 and pressed it again. The chamber exploded into motion, the walls, the shadows, the air itself folding around me, twisting my perception. I felt my limbs stretch, my body fracture, my mind dissolve, and the laughter reached inside me, ripping apart all sense of self, until I realized the ultimate horror. I was no longer human, no longer separate from the building, no longer separate from floor -1. I had become part of it, the pulse of the panel, the vibration of the concrete, the echo of laughter coursing through my mind, my bones, my blood. The shadows merged with me. I could feel the fingers, the claws, the impossible stretching shapes intertwining with my own body. The -1 panel pulsed one final time, and I knew that I would never leave this floor, never return to the surface, never see the world beyond the building. I was trapped in a pocket of reality, alive, aware, and infinite. And then the elevator arrived, the doors slid open smoothly, and the panel glowed -1, inviting calm, beckoning to anyone who would press it to step inside and follow me. I heard footsteps approaching from beyond. The doors unseen, other humans unaware, the shadows whispered there. Warning, but I was already part of the floor. I had become the compulsion, the pull, the lure, and I knew that anyone who pressed that button now would meet the same fate. I had the elevator would descend, the corridors would fold and twist, the shadows would gather, and the laughter would follow until they were no longer themselves, until floor -1 claimed them like it had claimed me, and I would watch and wait, invisible inside the walls, inside the floor, inside the vibrations, inside their bones, until the next curious soul arrived, the doors closed, and the laughter began again.